Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the country you're with us from today. Welcome to another GotSafety webinar presentation. I am your co-host, Rick Roman, along with
Michael Crowley.
And today, let me share my screen here with you if I could. We are talking about what every company that uses or supplies temporary employees needs to know about OSHA safety and infectious disease requirements, Michael.
This is going to be a great one, Rick. Everybody likes talking about infectious diseases. COVID stuff is driving me absolutely up the wall. But no, we've had some issues with this, right? We've had some people that have gotten a little bit of misunderstanding of these relationships and everything. And we thought we'd put this webinar together for us so we can go over. Rick, how's your day going today?
We are doing great over here. We before we do get into this, I just want to remind you that at the end, we will be taking questions. You can type them into the chat, and we will get to as many of them as we can at the end. In addition, we will have the slides for the presentation we'll be able to download. We are using our new platform today, as a matter of fact, Michael. We have made a transition. We had a couple issues with the previous, and we are using a new platform, and we're thinking this should be a lot better experience for you.
Well, we're hoping. You never know when it's going to go bad right in the middle of something, but I'm feeling, Rick, like this platform is making us look older. I mean, the bags, do they really, when you put cucumbers on your eyes, does it help out, Rick? I mean, I've never done it, but maybe I should go to a salon or a spa treatment. I don't even know what they do in a spa treatment, Rick.
Well, they might. I've never tried it. I'm just embracing my oldness. It is what it is.
Rick and I'll tell you this quick story before we get started. Rick and I went on a convention with another coworker of ours, Steve and Sam. You guys know him in the field, maybe. Sam, our general manager, and Steve, our guy in sales over here. Anyways, we were at one, and Steve was looking at Rick and I going, man, you guys were hairy. And so they sent us, what was that waxing thing that we went to?
Oh, my gosh.
They waxed our ears and nostril hairs. I mean, I'm not trying to be weird, but my gosh, it's an actual thing. I didn't realize it was. And you have seen Rick's ears look like a 16-year-old boy's. They were so smooth after all that. It was really an experience. So hashtag wax your hairy ears and nostrils, I guess, is the conversation. But
all right. Well, I will digress. Yes, I will. So, as I mentioned, we will have the slides available for you at the end. We'll also have the replay. You'll get a link automatically emailed to you. That'll be on our webinar channel. And we would hope you might subscribe to our webinar channel while you're there.
Yep.
Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the presentation here.
Yes, Rick.
So there are a lot of great reasons why somebody might want to use temporary employees, Michael. What's been your experience with folks using temporary employees?
The folks that we see that use temporary employees are really just it's a cornucopia of different industries and different reasons. One of the great things they like about it is when you're hiring and laying off employees, not because of performance issues, just about your needs issues, it makes it difficult sometimes to have an HR team in-house that can really keep up with that kind of work. So when you're using these temporary staffing employees, they really provide a fantastic system of they're doing the hiring, they're recruiting, they're putting on the HR services, they're doing it. And it makes it so 1 month you can have a lot and next month you can have a little bit, depending on your needs. And this really is a great service, but the service does come at a cost. It really sometimes for some people, it really blurs the line between what you're responsible for and what you're not. And so we're trying to get rid of those misnomers today because we've seen some of the people that we are in the field. We track every OSHA citation in California. We go across the country too, trying to track these things so we know what people are being cited for. And the simple reason is we're seeing an issue with staff leasing companies and the people that use them and them not quite understanding the relationship.
Exactly, and that's the purpose of this, is to, whether you're a staffing company that is with us here today, or whether you're a host employer, we just want everybody to really understand from an OSHA perspective what your responsibilities are. Because as you look at the list here, Michael already talked about the payroll and the HR and recruiting and all that, which is, it's great that the staffing company is able to alleviate you those responsibilities, and they do all that for you. The employee benefits, workers' comp insurance, unemployment, the fact that you can try before you buy. Sometimes you wind up hiring some of these temporary employees as full-time, but here you're able to really go through and see which ones that, without having to retrain every time, to be able to do that. And the fact that you get a surplus of employees, and that if somebody calls in sick, you're not dealing with a short staff. You just have somebody that comes in and replace them. So there's a lot of great things that the staffing company provides, but what they don't provide for you is they do not alleviate you of your responsibility, and vice versa. We have misconceptions on both sides as to the responsibilities when it comes to safety. Yes, Michael?
And Rick, you're right. And the word that you use there, Rick, that I think is key is alleviate your responsibility for a safe work environment. It really does not. Let me just expound on that for a second. What we find is some of these places that are utilizing staff leasing, they don't feel like they can just let it go to hell in a handbasket. Don't get me wrong, but what the logic of it is, sometimes they're confused on if the employee should come train, if they should train, what's happening, who's supposed to do that. Their employees probably took the guard off, so it's their fault. I mean, there's a lot of little things that take place in this environment that you've just got to know that you cannot alleviate or get rid of your responsibility for a safe work practices in your workplace just because they're leased by somebody else. That OSHA code doesn't allow that.
Exactly. And even from the staffing agency side, you also can't assume that just because they're the employer, sure, they may be the ones who could provide some of the more specific trainings, but there's trainings that you have to provide, and ultimately, even the trainings they provide, you're responsible to make sure that they received it. So you really need an open line of communication.
You've got
and having this stuff in your contract as to who provides what and what training and whatever, and that's great, so that you know your roles, but you're still both responsible to make sure it happens, and you need to be communicating that back and forth. So let's talk a little bit about, so really what you guys are working under is as a dual employer, where an employee has two employers at the same time, which is different from multi-employer work sites where two or more employers are present at a work site, like at a construction site. It's possible, however, to have a dual employer situation at a multi-employer site. But when it comes to OSHA citations, Michael, it's really, they're looking you as a multi-employer, and where if more than one employer may be citable for hazardous conditions that violate an OSHA standard, and a two-step process is followed to determine whether one or more employer will be cited. So in step one, they'll determine whether the employee is the creating, the exposing, the correcting, or controlling employer, which Michael will expand on here in just a moment. And step two is that if they determine which employer falls into these categories, and each of them have obligations, then they are to determine if the employer's actions were sufficient to meet those obligations. So Mike, talk about the definitions and expand a little on what these are and who these would apply to.
So there's four of these by chance. You can see them on the screen. We'll start out with the creating employer. This is the guy who creates the hazard and the hazardous condition that the violates the OSHA standard. So this is the guy that creates it. A simple example is a construction site, and you have a guy that set up scaffolding. He is the creating violation when he put up the scaffolding that didn't meet the standards. All right. The exposing employer. This is the employer who owns employees, who their own employees are exposed to the hazard. So let's say there's a guy who's going to be stuccoing the wall of this building. There's scaffolding. There's the creating is the scaffolding company, and the exposing is the plastering company. The correcting employer is the guy who fixes the problem or has the authority to fix that problem. So the scaffolding company under that analogy is the guy that gets to fix that. They get to fix it, and they're the correcting employer. And the final one is the controlling employer. This is the person who on the job site or the work location has the authority to direct and discipline employees, but more importantly, fix safety conditions. So that really is a step when it comes to the controlling. So if you go to the staff leasing example, you may have a staff leasing company that has a supervisor on site that's helping with things, but they may not have the ability to control the fixing of safety violations. So that would be an argumentative if that staff leasing is the controlling or if it is the person who's leasing the employees that are. But you can be more than one. You can fall into more than one area, like my example of the scaffolding. The creating and the correcting employer are the same person. The controlling probably would be the general on that, and the exposing would be the plastering company. So on the construction field, that's the way the example goes, and that's what gets us into trouble, because a lot of the staff leasing companies and these people that utilize them see this to be a construction issue, and it doesn't apply. And we're here to say it applies incredibly well, and they utilize this all the time. Rick's got some slides coming in the future that's going to show you some of the fines and the areas that they're popping that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But when you see these definitions, get your mind rolling. Think about who you are. Are you the creating? Of course you're the creating if you're the factory or the people that are leasing, because it's your equipment, right? Are you the exposing employer? That may be the staffing company, right? The correcting employer? Yep, that's the person who's leasing the employees. And then the controlling employer, that will probably also be the factory that's leasing the employees, because of the fact that you're there and you can fix your own machines, put guards back on and whatnot. But every case is different, and it's difficult for me to say which one you're going to fall into every time without hearing that issue where we're at. Stuff.
And that's part of what we talked about on the previous slide, where upon an inspection, that's what the OSHA inspector is going to determine, and that's going to be what decides whether one or both of you get ensnared. And how do the penalties work, Michael? Just as in case they do decide to cite, how does that work?
Oh. If they're going to cite you both at the same time. And a lot of times those fines are the same ones, just for the different ones. They cite you as a dual employer.
Yep. And so it's not a matter of them splitting the cost for the violation 50-50. They hit you both with the same violation and wind up getting to double dip, if you will. In that sense.
And they're and double dip is a funny term. I do agree, Rick. It kind of feels like double dipping, but what they're trying to do is hit both employers so that they understand what they're supposed to do. And in that kind of a OSHA case, you will find that both employers start to throw the other guy under the bus faster than you can shake a stick at sometimes. And that is a problem. So we just need to make sure we're all clear on our role.
Yep. And so you can see why that makes it vital that you really have an open line of communication, and that you're verifying, because you still even though the other party may be providing some of the things, whether it be training, PPE, because both of you are required and are responsible for it. If the guy that in your contract says is supposed to do it didn't do it, well, it's still your fault because you didn't verify.
That's right.
So you got to be really communicating and know your responsibilities.
Love it.
So on the COVID side of this, and this is really kind of what prompted this webinar, but we did a webinar last month. Some of you that are out of California may not be familiar with this, or if you didn't attend, but we did a webinar last month that on March 12th, Federal OSHA announced that they would be enacting this national emphasis program. Now, it's not a new regulation. It's an emphasis program where they will be sending their inspectors out to visit companies that have shown over the last year where they've had higher cases of outbreaks. We've all seen in the news where the meat packing plants and things like that, we know where they're having problems. So obviously they're high on their list, and they're going out and basically making sure that you're following the federal, state, and local guidelines, which vary across the country, that making sure that you're doing those things. So the federal states are, as you look at this map here, if you're in a powder blue state, that is a federally run, that's under the federal guidelines. So you're part of that emphasis program where they're going out and doing targeted inspections. If you're in the dark blue states, you may as well consider yourself a powder blue. The dark blues have state programs, but they only cover state and local government employees. Any private industry is going to be under federal guidelines. Right. So all of those states run under there. Now the medium blues, they have their own state programs, but as you can see, 4 of them, California, Michigan, Oregon, and Virginia, already have their own state COVID plans. So there's heavy enforcement going on there as well. It's worthy of noting that as of April 9th, Nevada has announced that they're adopting the provisions of this national emphasis program. So as we go on to the next slide here and look at their primary targets, they've got 2 lists. They've got their primary and secondary list. This is their primary list, broken up into 2 categories. The first being health industry, the second being general industry. Now, and you can look halfway down that general industry list is temporary help services. Now, they're not looking to come out to your offices at the staffing agencies, but they're looking to target your clients. And that, Michael, is kind of what prompted this webinar. Michael, if you could talk a little bit about that.
It's like going to a place to buy a cheeseburger and realizing that it's buy one, get one free day. I'm sure that's the way the OSHA agents feel when they get to a place and they find out that this factory who has violations also is utilizing a temporary employee service, and they have 2 employers in the work site. It's just all fun and games, right? It's just a lucky day that they run across that kind of a thing. It's a tough one. So you're right. This is what you're seeing. You're seeing all of the businesses that really were servicing were causing to get into compliance, but these are the targeted areas. Yes, Rick.
So if you're, again, if you're a temporary staffing company, they're looking at the types of industries that you guys service, and you know, between the states that have their own programs and the rest with this national emphasis, they are going out to make sure that these guys are following COVID protocol. And if you want to see what their findings are, now
not
this
good,
here,
not good. This is a tough slide, Ricky.
Yes, this one here. This is from California only. This California. Is a top list of citations that have been issued over the last few months by OSHA that are COVID related. So we're looking at the top 38, and now, you can see. Go ahead.
These are the top 38 of this. You'll see number 9 is really temporary help services up on the list. These are what individual businesses have been cited in the last little while. And the logic of this is these numbers should really help you understand that this is not a $2,000 problem if you get nailed with this. These fines on the end side, on the far right, are real numbers that businesses are trying to come up with pay. So unless you had an extraordinary great year and you have so much money you don't know what to do with, these kind of things that we're about to get into are key for you to understanding your role as a multi-employer site and making sure that the people you lease the employees got their act together and making sure you've got your act together. I mean, it's key.
Yes, I mean, you can see from $32,000 to just under $400,000. These are astronomical numbers that can just crush a business.
And Rick, may I point at this? The number 1 spot, we've taken out the name of these businesses so we weren't blaring them all over the place. But look at this. It's a correctional institution in the city of San Quentin. Now, I don't want to be the one to say what place, but let me tell you, my gosh, those inmates are having a COVID issue out there, huh? I mean, I would bet you it's the prison out there, San Quentin, and my gosh, somebody really is spanking those guys out there when it comes to the OSHA fines. And that is
Yes.
a terrible number that I would imagine it's going to be our own tax dollars that pay for those. I mean,
yes, that's the sad part of it.
San Quentin's not a private agency, is it, Rick?
No, that will be our tax dollars. But but I mean, you can see many of the ones. I mean, boy, 150, 135. Those are nothing to sneeze at either.
No, I know, but I'm saying even the prisons can't get this right? I mean,
yes, I know it's tough, but that's why you really need to be on the same page when it comes to what you got going on with your record keeping and making sure folks are trained so that when they do show up, that you've got your stuff taken care of, you're on the same page, because when they go to a company and find out they have leasing employees, they're just saying, oh, well, let's go check over there and see if their records match up or not. And if not, boy, you've got problems.
Listen, we don't like paying taxes as it is, but paying money to this kind of thing, it's enough to make you insane as a business owner.
Yes.
It's enough to make you insane. So what we've done on this slide is we've taken this and broken it down into basically temporary services, businesses that are really temporary services, and we're putting this together. So in the last little while, these are the fines that we're seeing from anywhere from 1,000 to 103,000 that are hitting the temporary services, the staff leasing industries in a variety of different areas. But you can see these numbers are not small. This isn't a number that you get to say, oh, ones, twos, threes, and fours. Now, in the past, if you and your leasing company, you've had a guru there that's done well with OSHA negotiation, and oh yeah, I can do the OSHA defense. It's great. And I say more power to you. Go for it. Just know this. The state did not do well last year with taxes. They did not do well with revenue in the state of California, and I would imagine in multiple states. Knowing in a state OSHA program place like California, all the money goes to the general budget of their fund, I am telling you, these fines are not going to be small this year. Do not expect to see a $50,000 citation and get that whittled down to the $1,000 mark. That just is probably not going to happen. So the reality of it is, whatever your experience has been in the past, it's changing. These people are coming down to make sure that they are keeping people safe. And if you're not in compliance, you're going to be looking at some of these fines. You're going to knock on our door and say, Rick, Mike, I've got a $50,000 fine. I need some help. Now, we'll be there to help you, of course. But, man, let me help you like this. This way is a lot better than the other way. Right, Rick?
Yes, sir. And on that note, Michael, if you would, talk about the fact that every one of these cases are also on expedited track.
Rick, you're right. That is the next little thumbnail that the problem is. They put it on an expedited track. So instead of taking 9 to 10, maybe months to a year to finish, these things are getting done in 30 to 90 days. They really are in a spot where they are pushing these through. That means the negotiation's harder. There's more eyes on this. They've got to look tough, so they're less likely to bend and move. And a lot of times when it comes to these things, they're not wrong. OSHA is not wrong in these areas. I mean, they're really getting the pressure from the uppity ups in Sacramento to really enforce these things to make sure we're protecting the employees. And these are very difficult fines to negotiate and to deal with. So it's better to keep you out of it than to get you in. But don't feel like if you get this fine, it'll be a year down the road, we'll figure out what happens. No. That is not what's happening. They won't even let us take them out of the expedited system, and they're pushing them through.
And it makes it much more difficult on our side to defend because you can't even hardly get the case file and start any kind of negotiations, and you're already up for hearing, right?
It's tough. Now, we've got some great contacts. OSHA people are very good people which we work with, and so we like to think our chances are better than the average bear, but the reality of it is this is something we need to stay away from by just keeping it compliant. We can do it.
Yeah. So to try to help you to just know, and I've dealt with a few startup staffing companies where they've even called me and they thought that, well, hey, the employer's the one with the machines. He's the one doing this, doing all the work. How is it my responsibility to provide training? Well, you do have responsibility even And I'm not saying that you need to provide all the training. Of course, they need to provide some specific training, but you need to verify and validate. And we've put this list together here of some things that you should be doing to assure that you're doing all the things you need to fulfill your obligations with OSHA. First off, you need to implement your own safety program as a staffing company, which includes having the proper written safety program documentation. Michael's going to go over that part here on the next slide of the documentation. You should be doing, Michael, if you can expand a little bit on doing initial work site evaluations and the PPE hazard assessments and what they should be doing before they even send their employees out.
Well, I know that when a staff leasing signs up, the sales guys, the account managers who are putting this together, they go out there and they do an assessment on the facility. But you really want to incorporate a COVID assessment to see how are you guys analyzing these things? How are you guys dealing with when somebody is COVID infected? What are you doing for testing, your policies, your procedures? You've got to ask these questions because there's some of these primary employers, the guys who own the facility that the employees are at, there have been a few cases that we've seen where they have a problem and the company is ignoring it or not ignoring it. They don't believe it's there. So if you have a couple COVID cases at your facility, and okay, that's fine, they probably got it from home. But if you're staring at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 cases happening at your facility, you got to read the wall, man. You got to read the room. Maybe there is something there that you're contracting. Now, I know it's very difficult to prove where the virus came from, but if you go with that kind of belief that they're just not here at our facility, they're getting it from home, I'm not saying that's the wrong way to go, but if you're going that way, you better have all your ducks in order that we have on the screen here as the primary employer. You better have a testing system in there. You have something where you say if you contract it, you go here, the notification and everything else. You better have your act together because if you have your numbers high, and in a webinar we did a few months ago regarding what the requirements are post, reporting your OSHA cases when it comes to how many people that get infected that work at your facility. The reality of it is you could be sitting on a time bomb that once you get nailed or some sunlight enters your circumstance, you're breathing down some of the fines we were just staring at. And so you've got to, as the staffing company, make sure your primary employers have some system in place that meets what you're looking at and vice versa on that. Yeah.
Yep. So as part of that assessment, you're going to want to validate that they have their own safety program in place, right? And that they have safety documentation, that they have all the programs that they should have, that they are up to date. And of course, if you're working with us, that's something that we can help evaluate for you to make sure that you're sending your employees to a place that has their stuff in order. You should be providing training and certifications, making sure that your folks have forklift certifications if they need them. Verify the COVID training. Mike was already talking about that. Some places, depending on the counties that they may be in, they may require that the employers are providing screenings before the employees go in. And so you got to make sure that they're doing all that. Just because it's their responsibility, it's still up to you to assure that that is being done. Make sure with the PPE, and again, that could be in your contract. Maybe the host employer is providing it, but you have to assure again that they're getting it and work that out in your contract to make sure that the employees are getting it. You need to validate their training. You should be trading training records with them so that you know that the employees have received all the training. After the initial evaluation, you need to be checking in once in a while and doing periodic inspections. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be a professional at machine guarding and know everything, but just to be able to go in and do some kind of evaluation. And again, that's something that we help with as well, if that's something that you need, but you need to be doing some kind of periodic inspections. Anytime you have accidents or illnesses, those cases all need to be investigated.
Yep.
You need to coordinate injury and illness record keeping with the host. So when it comes to record keeping and OSHA logs, only one employer should contain records of the injuries and illness of the employees. So in a case where the primary employer exercises day-to-day supervision of the employees, the primary employer is responsible for the injury and illness records. In a case where maybe it's a combination of the primary and the secondary, then you need to work that out again in your contract as to who's going to do it, but you need to verify. Now, probably the more common case is where the host employer has full supervisory, in which case they would keep the records on their logs. But you just got to make sure that you have those details worked out. And then you need to stay in touch with your associates and just make sure, see how things are going, see if they're getting their training, encourage them to report any kind of issues so that if they are having problems, if they feel that they have unsafe conditions where they're at, that they're letting you know. And they need to know that they could come to you and let you know these without fear of reprisal. So that's on the primary side. Now, Michael, we were talking about the documentation. Now, obviously, both the primary and secondary employer needs this and has different requirements. Expand a little bit on that and what they need to do there.
So it is still the most common thing to be cited for when it comes to documentation when OSHA visits your facility. There is just no doubt that it is the most common. Now, this is a list of some of the programs that we have. There's more than 27, don't get me wrong. Let me just first tell you how we get to a program. At GotSafety, we do not create programs unless they're required. Some safety professionals will create a program for everything. Their books become so thick, it is so difficult to implement, they're insane. What we're suggesting to you is each one of these 1 through 27 plus more are actually a code within the OSHA code that suggests you have to do training on it, but then you also have to have a written program. And so that's why these programs are there. So a normal business will probably have anywhere from 12 to 15 programs, depending on what they do for work. That would be a normal size business. But a staffing company, they may have a lot more. And the reason for it is because they have employees at a cornucopia of different environments, and they need to have the right program and training for those employees. Like Rick has said, it's not necessarily that the staffing company has to do all the training themselves, but it does mean that they have to ensure that the training is being done in that right. And it's easier to have an app where you can do it, and we'll talk about resources, but you have to be doing training. So if you don't know what programs you need, we can go through those with you. Tell us where your companies are at, what your employees are at. If you're a staff leasing company and you get a new account that's a little different than you've had before, call us. We're not going to know all your clients that you're getting every day, so that we can take an assess, do a review on the documentation that you do have, and we can update that for you. If you've already purchased the documentation and you're already in play, there's not a cost for updating your documentation. I mean, if you're just going to say, hey, we need a couple more programs, we want to keep you in compliant. It's cheaper to keep you in compliant than try to, my gosh, defend you from it. Trust us, it is a heck of a lot cheaper. On the employer side who has the facility you're leasing, you're not going to need as many, but you've got to make sure that they know what they're talking about when you get your employees at somebody else's facility. It's just important to know.
Yep. So there's that on the programs.
Yep.
Again, that applies to both. And then, so for the host employers, if again, these are recommendations of things that you should have in place. You need to have your own effective safety program that includes the safety documentation that Michael just talked about.
Yeah.
OSHA recommends specifying compliance responsibilities in your contract, even though, and I'll say it again, that it does not alleviate you of your responsibilities. Just because your contract says that the employer, the host employer is going to do it, if it doesn't get done, it's still you as the primary employer will still be cited. So, so we recommend you have that in the contract. Who better to provide the job specific training than the host employer? They're the ones who are going to be familiar with their machinery, with their emergency evacuation procedures and things like that. So there's no, I don't see how that you're not sharing some of the training between both of you. That there's just some stuff that the host is going to have to provide. You need to investigate all accidents and illnesses, just as I mentioned with the primary, report illnesses and accidents to the primary employer so that you're staying in communication so they know what's going on and that they can have their records to be the same. You got to coordinate the injury and illness records with the host, like I mentioned. That way we know who's recording these things. And again, when it comes to serious accidents or deaths, both of you have to report. So you can't say, okay, hey, I'm going to do it for both of us, I'll let them know. No, you both have to report, because when one of you does, that's going to be the cross-reference point that OSHA is going to see that, the company reported it, but this is a leased employee and we didn't get anything from them. And now they're going to come out looking at you. Any other thoughts on any of those things, Michael?
No, Rick, it's all just great things that we have to be doing to stay compliant and trying to figure out who's responsible for what, and educating our clients if we're a staff leasing company, and shockingly being humble enough to accept the education if we are the people that utilize staff leasing employees. I mean, it really is a finger pointing game when an OSHA hit, and we just want to alleviate that by getting ahead of the ball.
Yep. I decided to use this picture here, Mike. I thought, being a carnivore, that you would appreciate the meat packing plant and probably miss the days when we were able to rub shoulders. These guys are working without COVID partitions between them.
Rick, it is something that we look at and we say to ourselves, oh, if we could return to the days where we didn't have to have masks and stuff. You know, you talk about wearing masks and stuff. It's not bad for us on the balding side to wear things because our hair doesn't get really tied up. But those dang beard masks, my gosh, I would shave this thing if I had to wear one of those things. We utilize this picture knowing it's not the present time, but of times we hope to return where we can, not be so guarded all the time, I guess, but we'll see. Well, time will tell.
Yes.
Time will tell, Rick.
So,
Rick, when can we be in the same room with webinar again without making people feel uncomfortable? When can we do that, Rick?
I believe here in our state of Utah, here sometime next month, from what I understand, they're going to be lifting the restrictions. So we may actually be able to do our next webinar in the same room.
Rick, I don't know what to say. I'll have to hug you, Rick. I'm going to have to hug you. You know I'm going to have to do it, Rick. All right, keep us moving here, Rick.
All right. So talk a little bit about the resources. Obviously, some of these folks are clients of ours already, but there are some of the staffing agencies that we work with have already told me that they've invited their clients to help educate them and let them know about some of the things that we can do to help them if they need help in these areas.
So this section is not a shell spiel. Let me make sure this is clear. It's a reminding spiel that I need to get into. Remember, we create custom lessons for you at no extra charge, so that if you are a staff leasing company or you are the employer and you're like, man, I need some training on that unique subject, please turn in those requests. My team will call you, verify what your request is, make sure they are what you believe the training should be, and we will translate that into the great language of Spanish and put that into play. You've just got to know that you've got to utilize this. Online apps are necessary for some people. They can sign off like you see, but the reality is we've got audio lessons, video lessons, lessons in PDF forms for you. If you have needs or something isn't working right, you just call in. My team is here to take care of you. But one of the unique things about the relationship we have with you is we don't want you to start counting your pennies every time you need a new training lessons. It's included in what you're paying for already. So just call in and give us those lessons. We create them, push them out, and that we can stay on top of all the different training needs that are going on. It is one of the best services we've created over the last 30 years, and I'm very proud of it to be able to say we're able to do it and not charge you any more for it.
Yep. And with our online system, as you can see over there, it gives you the ability to create playlists for new hires, for COVID-19, for different departments. It really helps you get a handle on your training. And another wonderful thing is that you can go into your admin section and you can export all of those training records. So that way you can share them with your host employer, or if you're the host, you can share those with the staffing agency so that they can see that all of the required training has been provided. So it makes things really nice, and we just want to be able to help you with those things. If you're not already with us, then obviously you can talk to your partner about that has brought you to this webinar, and we'd be happy to discuss that with you. Haven, are you on the line here with us?
I am here, and I do have a couple questions.
All right. So if you would, real quick, can you go ahead and display the webinar slides so that folks, if they do want the slides, you can actually download them right here. It'll take you to a different tab, and then you can do that after the Q&A here if you want the slides. Again, you'll get a link tomorrow to the replay. But go ahead, Haven, fire away with the questions, if you will.
All right, and those slides should be available now. The first question has to deal with PEOs. How do they fit into the examples that you gave?
They're right in there with a PEO. They're a dual employer. They're a dual employer going to get hit on the multi-site. Same thing. This applies to a PEO just as well.
Yep.
All right, and if you got any more questions, people, just type them in. I've only got 2 more here, but someone needs clarification on injury reporting for a temp. Do they report it on their OSHA 300, or does the temp provider?
Rick, you take this one, sir. Take this one, Rick.
So it depends. Whoever is providing the supervisory role should be the one that is keeping the record. It only needs to be on one of yours. So if the staffing company provides a supervisor of sorts that's there on site supervising, then they would keep track of it. Yeah. If you are providing the supervisors there, then you're going to keep track of it. Again, you should have this worked out in your contract with the agency that you're working with, but that's who is actually the one supposed to be keeping the records.
And the next question is kind of on the same subject. Is that the same about OSHA reporting about subcontractors?
So when it comes to the OSHA reporting on the subcontractors, you need to report if you have an employee that's injured when it comes to a serious accident. So if there's dual employers, then 2 people are reporting. 2 people are reporting. So don't feel like if you're the general or you're one of those 4 categories of multi-employer, well, I'm not. Which one of those has to report? Everybody. Everybody has to report. You do not want to be in a spot where you're the general and you think, or you're the primary employer, the hosting employer, and you'll think, the staffing company will do it. No, both of you have to do it.
And then are temperature screenings required in part of these new regulations?
No, temperature screenings are not required. They're a good idea, though. They are a good idea, but they're not required for you to scan people's temperature when they're walking to their building. You are required to have some sort of diagnose period where they can answer questions. What are you feeling? That kind of stuff. But a temperature screening is not required. But we see a lot of businesses who put temperature screenings up in their entryway, and even just a gun at the secretary at the desk at the front. You know, the receptionist who has a gun who just points it and takes care of it. So.
And all of those screening, whatever the variation is of what you need to do screening wise are mostly controlled by the county. So you really need to look and see. Yeah. It's hard for us to tell you specifically. I mean, with all the counties across the country, you need to check with your county health department to see what's required for you.
Yeah, some of those Northern California counties have, they are
putting tough.
Oh my gosh. Jeez, I don't know how anybody stays working there. Jeez Louise. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Love Northern California. They have the best.
The water.
Right. Send the water, man. We need the water down there.
All right. Someone is asking, when someone does get injured, what medical facility provider do they send the person to, the host employers or the agencies?
I would imagine that's going to be something worked out in your contract, Mike?
There's not really a code that says who does it, but you really want to work that out in your contract. It's not an OSHA question as much of it as a legal HR question that you got to deal with.
All right, and we'll take one more question here before we wrap up for lunch. How does this work with the unions, the new regulation?
Well, it's a kind of a vague question. It works with the unions the same. I mean, if you're an employer, then union shop or not union shop, you still are there, right? And I mean, if the unions are leasing out employees, then it's the same relationship. But I don't know if a lot of them are doing that. I think you hire directly from the union and you're employing them, and then the union stewards just kind of represent them. So you've got to make sure what you're talking about, but it wouldn't change it at all. The union factor doesn't change it at all. So there you go.
Yeah, I got no more questions coming in right now.
Haven, how's your day going today?
It's going great up here in the video department.
Yes, we're grateful for that. Rick?
That's all I got, Mike. Go ahead and thank the folks here for us, and we'll sign off.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you guys for joining. We appreciate it. If you have any topics or anything you'd like us to cover, please, please, please send us the email. Let us know. Rick at GotSafety.com would like to hear all your comments that you'd like to tell him why we should be better looking or not. We're grateful for your services and what you can do. If we can do anything for you, let us know. I'm Michael Crowley.
And Rick Roman, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.